Hi there. Welcome to the first lecture for Sustainable Communities 393G. My name is John Post. I am going to be the instructor for this course. This is a 6-week online course. Hopefully you know it's online by now. And this course is really an introduction to GIS, the concept, as much as GIS, the software. In this class, we're going to go over some of the introductory things that you can do in Google Earth and Esri ArcGIS software, which Esri ArcGIS is the standard in the research and planning fields. It's a software that is really commonly used. It's really expensive, so being able to get the student access to this software is something that is a really beneficial part of this class, and hopefully you'll be able to make the most of it through this class and into the future. GIS is a really useful software in a lot of different contexts. I have been working in the GIS field for a number of years. And I've seen it used by biologists and environmental scientists. I've seen it used by engineers. I've seen it used in marketing. I've seen it used in police departments. It's used in planning. It's used in a whole slew of different hydrological and geological applications. So GIS is something that is specific to the field of geography in some ways. It came out of that field. It came out of geography and landscape architecture, and really as a way to kind of manage data about land use. And but it's also really something that is useful for a variety of other different fields. And if you're interested in things like energy, water use, natural hazards, natural and cultural landscape management, natural resource management, population change, demographics, conservation, land use, agriculture, and a whole lot of other applications, GIS applies to all of these things and is commonly used in all of these things. And so you can get an idea just by that list of really how flexible and useful this software actually is. So a little bit about myself. My background is in geography and regional planning. I have a bachelor's degree in history, a master's degree in geography and GIS, and I'm currently a PhD student at UMass Amherst in landscape architecture and regional planning. And in that department, I work specifically on climate change planning and adaptation and mitigation planning, with a focus on energy use. And so GIS has been a part of that process. It's a really useful tool when looking at a whole variety of these different things. So this class is really an introductory course, as I mentioned. This is going to be the textbook right here. This is what it looks like. It's called Getting to Know ArcGIS for Desktop. This is the 3rd edition. And this book has a lot of data that comes with it. It actually, try to buy the new version, not the used one. It's actually not that expensive of a textbook. And in the back of this book, you have a data CD, DVD actually, that has a lot of data that is going to be useful for the labs that we're going to be doing. So we're going to go through this book, at least the first handful of chapters, and really follow along with the labs. It doesn't do the best job of covering the conceptual parts of GIS, the geodesy, the basics of projections and coordinate systems, and really the underlying intellectual and analytical pieces that go into what makes up geography and some of the terms and things like that. So that's going to be something that is more covered in the lectures and in some of the other labs that we're going to be doing. But as far as getting a really good hands-on experience with Esri ArcGIS software, this textbook is invaluable, and we're going to get the most of it. So, in this first lecture, we're just going to do an introduction. If you could go to the discussion section at your convenience after you watch this lecture and go ahead and introduce yourself. Just give yourself, or sorry, give us an idea of your name. Give yourself an idea of your name as well. What your name is, what your background is, where you're taking the class, and if you have any experience with GIS, because it's useful for all of us, myself included, to know where you're coming from and if you have experience with GIS, because this is really a class that I want the students to take part in as far as participating and the pacing of how this class goes on, because we can go all the way up to more advanced modeling and analysis in GIS if you have some experience with it. It's going to be a lot easier to go through these first couple of labs, and we can actually make it a little bit further depending on who's in the class and what their needs are. So I'm going to try to cater that to you guys, and so if you could give me an idea of that in the first discussion, that would be great. We are also going to talk about the we're going to go over the syllabus and talk about the general expectations for the course and some of the the scheduling things, when things are due, things like that. And then we're also going to, at the second half of this lecture, we're going to go over the introductory concepts to GIS and see how far we can make it with data types and some of the basics of using a GIS. So if you could go ahead and click on the main page, there should be a link to the GIS syllabus. If you can go ahead and click on that and open that up, we will go ahead and start going over that. So hopefully you've gotten a chance to take a look at the syllabus for this class. It is on the front page. Pretty easy to download this and take a look at it. So up at the top is my contact information, name, email, office hours, and my on-campus office. I have not yet decided on office hours, just because of the nature of this being an online class. I wanted to get an idea, get a feel for who's in the class and when they have availability for or a need for this. So I'm going to create a forum and we can talk a little bit more about when those specific office hours will be. But generally speaking, I'm pretty available by email, Skype, or GChat. We can also set up a telephone office hour or in-person office hour in my office on campus. I'm in Hills North 211, if you're familiar with the UMass campus. That's in the southeast corner of campus. So this class is, as I mentioned, is an introductory course, but I expect that the students will have a pretty good idea of how to use the Windows operating system. ArcGIS is a Windows-only software, so if you have a Mac, you either have to partition your system or you have to run a virtual machine and run ArcGIS on that. So it's doable, but there are certainly some challenges to doing that. And we can talk a little bit more about that if you do have that issue, but there is no ArcGIS for Mac, so we'll have to work around that. As far as your knowledge of Windows, you don't have to be an expert, but hopefully you have a good idea about saving, copying, exporting files, and just general file management. Please talk to me if you have concerns about your skills with computers. Like I said, you don't have to be an expert, but hopefully you should be able to work with just the basics in terms of using the sort of file management and things like that. This is a course overview. We're going to cover GIS. It's a 6-week lab-intensive online course, and the reason it says lab-intensive is because this class really is focused on using the software, and there's going to be some periods of trial and error, for lack of a better term, and I want the students to get a feel for the good that comes from GIS, but also some of the bad. There are a lot of difficult things. There are some glitches in ArcGIS. There are some file compatibility issues. There are some things that are going to be a little bit difficult, and getting experienced with troubleshooting is actually a really big part of using ArcGIS software, and that's really the case with any software. So I want this to be a hands-on class. I want people to get an idea for how to use it really through their own techniques and their own strategies, and I can be there along the way to provide tips and pointers and things like that. But at the end of the day, to really learn how to use a software, you have to be immersed in the software. So students are expected to gain practical skills, techniques, tools, and workflows in GIS, as well as things like data management and cartographic design. And hopefully once you're done with the class, you'll have a better understanding of the terms and key concepts in GIS, as well as being able to apply geospatial concepts in GIS to solve real-world problems and communicate geographic data to an audience. Maps are really useful as far as telling a story. Maps can tell a whole lot. They can support your argument. They can detract from your argument. They're just really good graphics, and they can be used in a lot of different ways, and they can be used to support statistics, and they can be used to support language-based arguments and things like that. So there's a lot of benefits that maps can potentially bring to any work that you're doing. As I mentioned, the required text for this course is Getting to Know ArcGIS for Desktop version 3. This link here is to the Esri version of it. I wouldn't buy it from Esri. It's a little bit more expensive there. If you go through Amazon, you can find this book new for about $54 or $55, and I recommend you buy it new. It's not that expensive, given that you get the data with it and all of the labs that come in it. The reason I recommend it that you buy it new is just because you don't know if a used version has that software, if the CD's been scratched. So just better safe than sorry. It makes sense to get the new textbook if you can. And as I mentioned, the required technology for this course, ArcGIS 10.3 is the most recent version, and I don't see any reason why you shouldn't be able to get that. I will provide a link for that. You can get a trial version online, or you can get the student version, which I can provide a license for. It is a little bit complicated to download and install ArcGIS with the license and the extensions, so that's going to be something that we're going to work on through the course of this first week. And I will provide some links and more information on that as time goes by. Google Earth, I will also provide a link to that. That is a free to download software. That should be Google Earth for desktop, and the most recent version of that is available online as well. So I don't list it here, but there are some specs for ArcGIS that you're going to want to meet or at least get close to. ArcGIS is a very intensive software. It can really put a strain on your computer if you don't have something that can actually handle it. And I'm going to bring up real quickly, if you look online, there are, oh, that's not it. There are some hardware requirements. These are listed on this link, and I can provide this link to anybody who is interested, but these are sort of general recommendations and requirements for being able to use ArcGIS. And if you don't have this, if you don't have a computer that meets these requirements, there may be some other ways to work around this. If you're on campus, ArcGIS is on quite a few of the computers actually. They're on the computers in the library. So you should be able to access this if you're around UMass campus. If you're not, there might be some other alternatives which we'll have to work out on a case-by-case basis. So please get in touch with me if you have that issue. If you don't meet the hardware requirements, let me know as soon as possible, and we can try to work through that. What you're going to be graded on in this class are primarily the labs, the homeworks, and the quizzes. There are going to be 5 out of the 6 weeks we're going to have a lab and a homework, and that's going to make up 55% of your total grade. I want to know that you can work through the labs and work through the process, and that's really important for understanding how to use the software. The quizzes are more on the conceptual side, and that is really covering the key terms and concepts, and so that's a big part of it. There are 3 quizzes. There's going to be one in week 1. There's going to be one in week 3 or 4. I don't remember which. And week 6 is going to be the final quiz of the semester, and those are going to be cumulative, so they're going to cover concepts as we go, and I'm interested in knowing how much you guys gain as far as those key terms and concepts throughout the course of the semester, because those are really important for knowing what you're doing in the software. And as far as a project for this, the final project is only going to be 10% of your grade, and that week 6, the final week of the class, is going to be devoted to working on the final project and troubleshooting. And for that, I'm really interested in getting you guys involved in your own sort of process of finding data, going out to publicly available sources, places that I will supply you with a list of. There's a lot of resources online specifically for GIS data. Those are federal agencies, places like the Census Bureau. They're also available through state websites. Things like MassGIS has a plethora of different types of data that you can access, as well as census data. So I'm really interested in getting you to go out there and get that data and turn it into, in the course of that week, it's gonna be a small project. You're not gonna have time to do something really substantial, but being able to go out and find that data and turn it into something that tells a story, essentially. And so for the last 10% of your grade, it's going to be discussions, and these are really only a handful of the weeks we're going to have discussions. I just want to see that you're involved in the class and able to engage with the concepts that are being discussed. So as far as due dates, this is a big part of the online course experience, and I tried to make this as homogeneous as possible. There are 2 important due dates during the week. There's the Thursday night due date, which is Thursday night by midnight, and there's the Sunday night due date, which is Sunday night by midnight. And it's a pretty logical progression. The labs are due Thursday night by midnight. The quizzes are due Thursday night by midnight. So that's sort of the coursework that takes place in class, quote unquote. The homework and the projects are due Sunday night. So that's the stuff you take home, and hopefully you have a little time over the weekend to work on those. The discussions do not have a due date. Hopefully you'll take part in them as they go on, but I am not going to grade them until the end of the semester. So just read ahead here. The assignments are going to be submitted, with the exception of the quizzes, are going to be submitted in PDF, JPEG, TIFF, or another common image format. And that's really at your discretion. I would prefer JPEG, but there might be something that, as far as a bigger map, you might want to export in a PDF where you could print it out on a page or something like that, and that's acceptable as well. But knowing how to do that, as far as using Windows software, being able to export, that's really important, because all of your assignments are going to be in that format. I'm going to be a little bit lenient on late submissions. They're going to lose 1 percentage point a day. I understand that it's an online class. I understand that you guys have different things going on during the course of the week, and so if you can't get something to me when it's due, as soon as possible is much appreciated. And just take a minute to review the calendar for these 6 weeks that we're going to be together. As I mentioned, the assignments really focused on labs and homeworks. During those first 5 weeks, there's a lab and homework for every week. There's a quiz in week 1, there's a quiz in week 3, and then there's also a quiz in week 6, which is going to be a little bit bigger of a quiz. It's going to cover, cumulatively going to cover a lot of these concepts. And that's also when the final project is due. We're not going to do a lab or homework that week. And lastly, I just want to talk briefly about the installation. Before we go anywhere, we have to install all of this software, right? So we have to make sure that you guys have computers that meet the specs that we have talked about. We also have to make sure that you have the textbook and are able to download and install all of the software and the data that goes along with it. So we have to install 3 things here: Google Earth for desktop, ArcGIS 10.3 for desktop, and the data disk that comes with the textbook. And so that's going to be an important part of week 1. We're gonna do a lab and a homework, but really key, we have to get that done, the software installation. And because that's the whole course is contingent on getting that done. So that's just a quick overview of the course syllabus. Please let me know if you have any questions. Welcome to the class. I look forward to doing this. This is going to be a really fun class. We're going to do some interesting projects, hopefully, and hopefully hear a little bit more about you guys as the course goes along and what your interests are and how we can apply GIS to that. So yeah, thanks for listening, and I look forward to working with you guys. The next section in Module 1 is an introduction to GIS. GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems, and it's essentially a spatial database and all of the associated tools that go along with it. As a spatial database, GIS functions in a similar way as something like Microsoft Access, which is a software used for managing, manipulating, and querying data based on its attributes. The only difference with GIS is that this data is also spatially explicit or geographic in nature. The associated tools that fall under that umbrella term, geographic information systems, are a really key part of making the spatial database more robust and able to do a lot more analytical stuff than just a regular database. Some of those tools are data editing tools, data manipulation tools, there are visualization tools, there are analytical tools, and there are also modeling tools once you get to a more advanced stage. But like any software, geographic information systems is a tool. It is used to achieve an end. So if you have a problem or a question or an issue which has a geographic component, GIS allows you to address that issue in a way which is spatially explicit. Geographic information science is the theoretical foundation on which GIS, the software, is based. And it really covers how we conceptualize, think about, talk about, and analyze geographic concepts. GI science comes out of the field of geography, but has a lot of affinities with fields like geodesy, which is the science of measuring the shape of the Earth, something like remote sensing, surveying, computer science, cartography, math, linguistics. I would include in this list environmental science and history, which all have important spatial components and which contribute to this concept of geography. Just a note about geodesy and remote sensing, these are really crucial fields for GIS because they provide a lot of the guiding principles that allow us to develop a software based on GIS. Geodesy and remote sensing provide a lot of the data sources. Remote sensing in particular provides some of the data for geodesy and measuring the actual shape of the Earth, which is a geoid and not a perfect sphere. Remote sensing is essentially satellite instrumentation, which shoots back to Earth this information, things like imagery, things like infrared measurements, and things like LiDAR. So this course covers GIS, the software. but it provides us a foundation in GI science, which hopefully will allow you to take GIS to the next level and do some more rigorous analysis with it in the long term. So now that we've talked about what GIS stands for, what does a GIS actually do? Well, first and foremost, it's a database. It allows you to store and access data in the same way you would a regular database, a library, or an archive. In the same way, it allows you to query and retrieve data from your database, asking questions of the GIS and displaying answers in a way which accounts for the location, much like you would querying an access database, but with a spatial component. You can also create data. There are different techniques for doing this, things like digitizing existing maps, but you can also create new spatial data using a GPS unit. You can also create data on the fly in a GIS software, which is going to be what we do in this week's lab. The next step is something like spatial analysis, which is a little bit more advanced. That encompasses things like map algebra, overlaying different types of layers on top of each other, spatial statistics, and modeling. And lastly, visualization and cartography. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, is what they say, I think a map is worth a picture and some words. Usually you put some words on your map. So visualization of your map can really tell a story that you may not be able to tell just by talking about it or just by putting words down. Maps really allow you to tell the spatial side to whatever story you're trying to get at. Here's a quick list of the types of questions we can answer with GIS. What are suitable and unsuitable locations for development? What properties might be at risk from something like storm surge or flooding? And questions about spatial match and mismatch, such as can target populations access social service providers? Or where do the unemployed live and where are the jobs? How can we connect the two with changes in mass transit routes? Questions about noxious neighbors or incompatible land uses. One such would be, will the Springfield Casino raise or lower neighboring property values? Questions about development patterns and their change and evolution over time. Things like projecting future population growth or sprawl, and long-term transportation planning. And what are the geographic patterns of something like crime? Next, I'm going to run down a list of different types of projects that you can do and some of the map outputs that you can get from GIS. This one is site and subdivision planning, slope and elevation analysis, watershed management and wetlands protection, digitizing or georeferencing older maps, hazard mitigation planning. This is a map of mean high water and high tide in an area of Maine. Emergency response and evacuation. This is California wildfires. Forecasting for environmental change. This is satellite imagery from the 1970s up until the 1990s, showing areas of basically the loss of water in the Aral Sea. And you can see the progression there. You can also use GIS to identify spatial patterns of activity. These are clusters of grants that were given out, technology grants that were given out in Appalachia. Detecting geographic concentrations of people or activity. This is areas where residents are underserved by existing facilities. This is also really useful for crime mapping. This is called hotspot analysis. You can do market feasibility analysis, looking at a proposed site for a business and looking at areas and different types of customers that you might serve.